Good morning, class 7. Today we will continue with the chapter The Mughal Empire. That day we have started the chapter and we have discussed a lot of things about it. When we talk about the Middle Ages, this was the dynasty or the empire which holds lot of importance. And the rulers in this dynasty, they have ruled our country for quite a long time till the time the Britishers came and had taken over. So let's see what we have studied. Just we will revise it a little bit and then we will continue. So the Mughal Empire, they have ruled the Indian subcontinent. The most difficult part was that people living in India were having different culture. Some of them have different traditions, different eating style, the way of dressing up, the way of talking. The everything was very different, and ruling them together like under one sovereignty, it was really very difficult. Okay, so now then we have talked about who the Mughals were. We have talked about the lineage from where they have this like who now were the Mughals were the descendants of two great rulers. From mother side they were descendant of Genghis Khan, the Mongol ruler, and from their father's side they were successor of Timur. Timur Lang, he was all popularly known as because he had some problem in his leg while walking. Then we have talked about the military campaigns of the Mughals. Babur, he was the first one and who had set up the empire here in 1526. He ruled till 1530 and he was succeeded by his son. Then he was just 12 years when he had he got the empire of Fargana, and but then he had to leave that ancestral land and he came to because of these the Uzbeks, the Mongols, and then he was wandering from one place to another, and he was invited by Behlol Lodi, who was an uncle of Ibrahim Lodi, to come and defeat him. In 1526, in the first battle of Panipat, Babur defeated Ibrahim Lodi and he captured Delhi and Agra. But Behlol Lodi had not, he didn't imagine that he's going to do this. He felt that he will come, he will defeat him, he will plunder the country, take the loot and leave it. But it didn't happen the way he had thought of. And instead what he did, he stayed here, set up his own empire, which is popularly known as the Mughal Empire. Then we have talked about the major events in the reign of Babur. That is in 1526 he defeated Ibrahim Lodi. 1527 he defeated Rana Sanga, the Rajput ruler at Khanwa. In 1528 he defeated Rajputs at Chanderi and established his control. Then we have talked about Humayun, who was defeated by Sher Shah, the very brave ruler, and he ruled he was here from almost you can say 1540 to 1555. But then in 1555 Humayun again recaptured Delhi, and then he was followed by his son Akbar, who was just 13 years when he had ascended the throne. Akbar became independent of the regent of Bahram Khan in 1556 to 70. That was a time period in between. Bahram Khan was his caretaker who was ruling in the name of Akbar because he was very small that time. Then he had problems with his half brother Mirza Hakim, and 1579 to 80 there was a revolt from him, and Akbar adopted lot of policies to make the people happy and to rule peacefully. Then he was uh, followed by Jahangir that is Salim, who was son of Akbar, and he started in Akbar's military campaign started by Akbar continued. The Sisodia rulers of Mewar, Amar Singh, accepted Mughal service. Less resourceful campaign against the Sikh the Ahoms, and Ahmednagar followed. Okay, so from here we will be continuing the chapter. Akbar had adopted different measures, like you can say he had adopted a matrimonial alliance. That was one of the strategy in which he got married to the Rajput princess, and that ways the Rajputs accepted his suzerainty, and he said that he will be, in case of any revolt or any problems, the Mughals are going to help those Rajputs. So, and he gave these Rajputs very high ranks in the empire, just to appease them, so that they will support him throughout. So this was his strategy. Then we talk about Shah Jahan. In 1627 to 1658, Mughal campaign continued in Deccan under Shah Jahan. The Afghan noble Khan Jahan Lodi rebelled and was defeated. Campaigns were launched against Ahmednagar. The Bundelas were defeated and Orchha seized. In the northwest, the campaign to seize Balkh from Uzbek was unsuccessful, and Kandahar was lost to the Safavids. In 1632, Ahmednagar was finally annexed and the Bijapur forces sued for peace. In 1657-58, there was conflict over succession among Shah Jahan's son. Aurangzeb was victorious and his three brothers, including Dara Shikoh, were killed. Shah Jahan was imprisoned for the rest of his life in Agra. So, uh, there was a war of succession between these brothers, and Aurangzeb, you can say, was the smartest of them all, whereas Shah Jahan wanted his son Dara Shikoh to take over after him, but then Aurangzeb initially conspired by, can say, um, convincing Murad to accompany him in the war, and they defeated Dara Shikoh. Later on, he murdered Murad as well. After that, he, you can say, imprisoned his father, Shah Jahan, in the and he was then Shah Jahan was taken care by his daughter Jahan Ara, who was with him till his death in 1666. Okay, then Aurangzeb from 1658 to 1707. In the northeast, the Ahoms were defeated in 1663, but sorry, just 1 minute, children. Defeated, but rebellion again in the 1680s. Campaign in the northwest against the you can say the Yusufzais and Sikh were temporarily successful. Mughal intervention in succession and internal politics of the Rathore Rajput of Marwar led to their rebellion. Campaigns against the Maratha chieftain Shivaji were initially successful, but Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji, who escaped from Agra, declared himself an independent king, and resumed his campaign against the Mughal. Prince Akbar rebelled against Aurangzeb and received support from Marathas and the Deccan Sultanate. He finally fled to Safavid, Iran. So, when Aurangzeb ascended, he was a very, you can say, um, adamant about his religious policies. So, whatever changes or Akbar had brought, they all were repelled by him. Then he was not very, he was not treating the Rajputs the way Akbar had. Then what happened in Deccan, there were Shivaji was there, who created a lot of problems for him. He invited Shivaji to Delhi for reconciliation, but he insulted him and imprisoned him. But Shivaji was very smart, and he ran away by sitting in the fruit basket one day, and he raised till the time Shivaji was alive. He didn't leave Aurangzeb peacefully, and he was always creating some or the other problems for Aurangzeb. So lot of problems have come up. Aurangzeb initially thought of moving to, like, later 25 years almost, he moved to Deccan to rule there from there. But then Deccan, from there, because he was in Deccan, Delhi became weak. So later on, the Mughals had lot of problems. And then again here his son Akbar also rebelled against him. Later on he ran away to Safavids. Then, after Akbar's rebellion, Aurangzeb sent armies against the Deccan Sultanate. Bijapur was annexed in 1685 and Golconda in 1687. From 1698, Aurangzeb personally managed campaign in the Deccan against the Marathas, who started guerrilla warfare. Aurangzeb also had to face the rebellion in North India of the Sikh, Jat, and Satnamis. In the northeast, by the of the Ahoms, and in the Deccan and Marathas. His death was followed by a succession conflict against his amongst his son. So he had problems with the Sikhs also. He was not very, you can say, uh, didn't have that much of farsightedness that he should may have a good cordial relation with all the religion, because India being a diverse country, there are different religion, and a ruler, to rule peacefully, had to have a cordial relations with all the religion. But maybe he was not able to understand that. Then uh, the Marathas, who adopted the guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is when people are hiding, and from hiding they are, attacking their opponent. That is the secret strategy. Since Marathas had the benefit, there were hills and all, so they took advantage of that and they attacked the Mughal empire. You can say the Mughal forces off and on. Then Mughal marriages with the Rajput. The mother of Jahangir was a Kachwaha princess, daughter of the Rajput ruler of Amer, modern day Jaipur. The mother of Shah Jahan was a Rathore princess, daughter of Rajput ruler of Marwar, Jodhpur. Mughal tradition of succession. The Mughal did not believe the rule of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherit his father's estate. Instead, they followed the Mughal and Timurid custom of uh, compulsory inheritance, or division of the inheritance amongst all the sons. Follow the highlighted passage in Table 1. Note the evidence for rebellion by Mughal princes. Which do you think is fairer division of inheritance? Primogeniture or compulsory? Now, when we talk about these the way of inheritance or succession, initially, in India, the dynasties which have ruled, they also have the system of where the eldest son ascended the throne. But in Timurid succession, it was equally divided, or there was some sort of war of succession, and whoever won the war, he became the ruler. So now it is up to you. You have to decide, or what do you think, in your opinion, which one is a better way of succession? Now, Mughal relation with other rulers. Take a look at Table 1. Once again, you will notice that the Mughal rulers campaigned constantly against rulers who refused to accept their authority. But as the Mughals became powerful, many other rulers also joined them voluntarily. The Rajputs are a good example of this. Many of them married their daughters into Mughal families and received high positions, but many resisted as well. So, this is like I told you that Akbar had adopted this policy of like inviting those Rajputs, and in return, they got their daughters married to these Mughal rulers, and they got high positions in the Mughal Empire. But then there were people who didn't accept the Mughal suzerainty, and they kept on rebelling against the Mughals. The Sisodia Rajput of Mewar refused to accept Mughal authority for a long time. Once defeated, however, they were honorably treated by the Mughals, given their lands back as assignments, that is, Watan Jagir. The careful balance between defeating but not humiliating their opponents enabled the Mughals to extend their influence over many kings and chieftains. But it was difficult to keep this balance all the time. Look at table 1 again. Note that Aurangzeb insulted Shivaji when he came to accept Mughal authority. What was the consequence of this insult? So you can see the difference what has happened. The Sisodia Rajput, they didn't accept the Mughal suzerainty, but once they were defeated, they were given respect. They were treated very they were given all the honors by the Mughals. But later, what has happened? Later, when you talk about Aurangzeb, he invited Shivaji and he insulted him. So, because of that insult, till the time Shivaji was alive, he created a lot of problems for Aurangzeb. So, you can see what was the result of the insult. Then Mansabdars and Jagirdars. As the empire expanded to the to encompass different regions, the Mughals recruited diverse bodies of people. From a small nucleus of Turkish nobles, Turanis, they expanded to include Iranians, Indians, Indian Muslims, Afghan Rajputs, Indian Muslims, Afghans, Rajputs, Marathas, and other groups. Those who joined Mughal services were enrolled as Mansabdars. Now, the Mughal Empire, they were the Mughal rulers, they were expanding the empire and they had to recruit different people for the administration, for the purpose of the you can say the in the armies, and those who joined the Mughal services were known as Mansabdars. The term Mansabdar refers to an individual who holds a mansab. Mansab meaning a position or rank. So a person who was recruited by them was known as a mansabdar. A mansab means a position or a rank. So it was a grading system used by the Mughals to fix rank, salary, and military responsibilities. So three things were there. They fixed the ranks, their salaries were fixed, and their military responsibilities. Rank and salary was determined by a numerical value called Zat. The higher the Zat, the more prestigious was the noble's position in court and the larger his salary. So it depended on the Zat. A person, how much salary he was getting was determined by the Zat. If the person was having a higher Zat, that means he will be giving more respect and that position was considered to be prestigious, and obviously then more salary will be given to him. The Mansabdar's military responsibilities required him to maintain a specified number of Sawar or cavalrymen. The Mansabdars brought his cavalrymen for review, got them registered, their horses branded, and then received money to pay them as salary. So the Mansabdars, they had some military responsibilities, and for that they had to maintain a good number of soldiers, that is Sawar or the cavalrymen. Then they brought they were off and on. There was a review system was there. These cavalrymen were reviewed. The horses which they had, it has to be branded, and then they received money to pay them as salary. The Mansabdars got money to give salary to these cavalrymen, and Mansabdars received their salaries as revenue assignment called Jagirs, which were somewhat like Iktas. Ikta, which was there in Sultanate period. So it was like Mansabdar, they got their salaries from the revenue which was collected from the Jagir, that is the land, and it is like Jagir was similar as Ikta, that they were given a portion of particular land, and from there the revenue whatever revenue was collected was given, was their salary. But unlike Muktis, most Mansabdars did not actually reside in or administer their Jagir. But the difference was that these Mansabdars, they did not reside, they did not lived in those Jagirs, that land or that area, and they were not having the responsibility of administering that Jagir. They only had right to the revenue of the assignments, which was collected for them by their servants. So you can see the difference. They were only allowed to collect the revenue but not administer that area. So this was the difference. Zat ranking: nobles with a Zat of 5,000 were ranked higher than those of 1,000 in Akbar's reign. There were 29 Mansabdars with a rank of 5,000 Zat, but Aurangzeb's reign the number of Mansabdars had increased to 79. Would this have meant more expenditure for the state? Okay. So the servants were collecting the revenue for the Mansabdars. Mansabdars themselves served in some part of the country. In Akbar's reign, these Jagirs were carefully assessed so that their revenue were roughly equal to the salary of the Mansabdar. By Aurangzeb's reign, this was no longer the case, and the actual revenue collected was often less than the granted sum. There was also a huge increase in the number of Mansabdars, which meant long wait before they received a Jagir. These and other factors created a shortage in the number of Jagirs. As a result, many Jagirdars tried to extract as much revenue as possible while they had a Jagir. Aurangzeb was unable to control these developments in the last year of his reign, and peasantry therefore suffered tremendously. So, what happened here? They have shown us the difference. In the Akbar's reign, what happened, that Jagirs were carefully assessed. They were measured. The quality of the soil was also checked. So the revenues were almost roughly calculated, and it was the salary of the Mansabdar. But what happened in Aurangzeb's reign? Number of Mansabdars had increased, and the revenue which was collected was less than the expected amount. So then that was one drawback. Then there was also huge increase because the number of mansabdars had increased, so they had to wait for a long time to get or to receive a jagir, that a land, for the purpose of their salary. Then what they did, obviously, when they are not getting the particular salary, what they did, they tried to extract as much revenue as possible from the peasants. So at the end of the day, the peasants were suffering in the reign of Aurangzeb. So that is all for today, class. Please do revise the chapter. We will continue in the next class and finish off the chapter. Please do the questions. Send the answers online only. These questions are just for the sake of revision, and you're not supposed to do them in your notebooks. Thank you, class. Take care of yourselves. Be safe at home.